Good morning, everyone. Welcome to God's Grace on Me and Angel Wallace Productions. It's a beautiful sunny morning today. It is 7:33 a.m. It is 49 degrees, fair and sunny. It is the 9th of October of 2024. And President Trump will be in Reno on Friday, so I've already made arrangements to get my tickets, even though they don't give you tickets. I think it's just a means to see how many people will attend. So I'm hoping to go. We have some new members here. I want to mention their names. Only 65 Girl, Jean 243, Rush CP, and Jaspeg. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to the family. And the only thing I ask is that you share my videos. Okay, folks. So today is the day when the Hurricane Milton is supposed to land. And that may be later on in the day, I would imagine. I haven't heard anything else. So what I decided to do, I read on a little further into our readings of the Cry of the Phoenix. And I decided I was going to skip over and I would start at chapter 23. And the reason for that is the information they give is good, but it's not something that I believe is that important to get out. So I just want to try to make the best of the time that we have and bring things that I believe is necessary information to you. So let's begin with chapter 23, recording number 2, Haton. It's Wednesday, December the 27th, back in 1989. It's 1:30 p.m. It's year 3, day 133. Oh, would that it be so. Thomas Jefferson, 1799, quote, "When the press is free and every man able to read, all is safe." Abraham Lincoln, 1860, quote, "Let the people know the facts and the country will be safe." The Bitter Cup. As Americans begin to comprehend their particularly grim future, many are perplexed as to how they could have been kept in the dark for so long. Easily spoon-fed like gullible children, they have been unaware that the cartel has swallowed the massive corporate interlock which controls the major media and entertainment outlets in the United States. Because the cartel owns the international communication conglomerates, it appoints its agents to fill top administrative posts. These few elitists, sitting astride awesome media power, successfully censor information filtered to the masses through the major TV networks, the news services, prestige newspapers, and glossy magazines. Have you not noted that as you change from one newscast to another, even the pictures are the same and the words identical, filtered, and selected? The cartel has been able to formulate public opinion and predetermine the mindsets and psychological responses of the entire nation for many years. And now, thanks to this media machine, the mass murderer Mikhail Gorbachev miraculously assumes the image of a savior. The cartel employs a network of behavior specialists who staff think tanks, mental health laboratories, and government agencies, and many of them controlled by the Rockefeller-funded Tavistock Institute of Human Relations in England. These manipulation specialists have formulated effective mind control strategies being used to prepare the masses for the evolving global socialist dictatorship. Dr. Dorwin Cartwright, brainwashing specialist at Tavistock, once admitted in Tavistock's journal, Human Relations, I quote, "Among the many technological advances of the past century that have produced changes in social organization, the development of the mass media of communication promises to be the most far-reaching. It is conceivable that one persuasive person could, through the use of mass media, bend the world's population to his will. Is it possible that if you once found the one daring leader, you too could bend the world's population to a new will? Edward Bernays, another Tavistock manipulation specialist, applauded this trend, and he wrote years ago, "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democrat socialist society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, and our ideas suggested largely by men we have never heard of. We are dominated by the relatively small number of persons who understand the mental processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind, who harness old social forces and contrive new ways to bind and guide the world. Will none of you be brave enough to go forth to Ted Turner and Paul Crouch of TBN and TNT and demand that you get an audience? Can you not reach beyond the limits of self-imposing shackles and request from the daring independent networks a feast of truth instead of the steady diet of poison? God help you all if some ones of you do not act and act soon. These brave ones will carry the banner if you will, but stand strong and back them." Retired General Lewis W. Walt, a commander of American Marines in Vietnam, reported that the U.S. media, particularly the major TV networks, transmitted propaganda for the communists throughout the war. Walt notes that the 77-day Battle of Khe Sanh, a crushing defeat for the enemy, was misrepresented by American television as a hopeless siege which must only end in disaster. Walt, who watched those TV news reports, says, "During the siege, one C-130 aircraft was hit and burned on the landing strip. Every night for a week, I saw that one plane shown from different angles, conveying the impression to many viewers that our planes were falling to the enemy by the dozen." So pervasive was this impression of Khe Sanh's hopelessness that even President Johnson thought it might be lost. In 1968, the North Vietnamese made a blunder. It became known as the Tet Offensive. They made a massive attempt to assault the principal cities of South Vietnam, and they suffered staggering losses without achieving their objectives. And after the battles were over, Walter Cronkite, the CBS anchorman, came to South Vietnam for an on-the-spot report. There was no fighting going on at all. I was stunned. Therefore, when I saw Cronkite on television standing in hue, microphone in hand, while in the background were the sounds of machine gun fire and explosions, which apparently had been dubbed in by sound effects men. The Tet Offensive, which was both a strategic blunder and a military disaster for the North Vietnamese, was reported to the American people as a defeat for our forces and those of South Vietnam. Peter Braestrup, formerly of the Washington Post and one of the most perceptive and honest newsmen who reported the war, did a study of the media coverage of the Tet Offensive and came to the same conclusion. He has been rewarded with ridicule. A media machine is powerful. This treacherous is as deadly as any weapon ever devised. And the cartel's malignant distortion of the real facts contributed mightily to the demoralization of America during the war and to the ultimate abandonment of Southeast Asia to Soviet surrogates. The Vietnam experience was designed by the cartel to dissolve America's will to resist Soviet aggression in Central America. It was used to prepare the masses, traumatized by confusion and collective guilt, to surrender all weapons to a global police authority, ostensibly to prevent future war. And through the raw manipulatory power of the media, the cartel has popularized the fatal myth that America is militarily strong, while deliberately obscuring the fact that you basically stand naked to annihilation. And best of all, from the cartel's viewpoint, the media machine has brought the gullible dupes of America to a collective mindset of trust. Trust in whom? Why, trust in the Soviet Communist Party, trust in the KGB, trust in the Red Army and its secret intelligence apparatus, the GRU. This according to pollster Daniel Yankelovich. Yankelovich periodically conducts surveys to gauge American psychological readiness for the final stages of the plan. And in 1988, Yankelovich announced that the majority of Americans now trust the Soviets enough to sign a treaty eliminating most nuclear weapons, that is, most American nuclear weapons, within 12 years. Isn't it interesting that 12 years just happens to bring you to the year 2000? Well, the plans were designed that way. By deliberate design, America, having enjoyed unquestioned global military superiority between 1945 and the late 1960s, now faces military defeat and submission to the godless Soviet warlords, who already control, with the blessing of the world's most powerful capitalists, the apparatus slated to become an unchallengeable world police authority. Cartel master planners wrote this hideous ending to America's final chapter years ago. Walt Whitman Rostow, the State Department official who called for an end to America's nationhood as historically defined, also brazenly announced in 1962 that there would never be a victory of the United States over Russia, and that there would never be a victory of capitalism over socialism. Indeed, that would never do. In the 1950s, the U.S. enjoyed unquestioned strategic superiority over Soviet weapons, which in those days could not have hit the broadside of a big barn. Yet the U.S. government was already studying conditions when surrender after nuclear attack would be advisable. In the same period, the Tavistock-linked Rand Corporation produced a study which concluded that the U.S. may have to surrender to the Soviets without fighting. And in 1957, the U.S. had an 8-1 military lead over the Soviets. That year, a cartel commission chaired by Roman Gaither of the Ford Foundation disseminated a secret report to government officials painting a bleak picture of America's ability to withstand the Soviet threat. Now, bulging with disinformation, the report was intended to convince America's leaders that the U.S. could never successfully compete against the dedicated, highly disciplined Russians. The report intimated that in order to avoid death by incineration, America must prepare for preemptive surrender. Now, this has been the mindset of those who have directed U.S. policy ever since. As two eminent political commentators have noted, they figured that the only way to avert nuclear incineration was to reduce U.S. strategic power so far below the Soviets that our only rational alternative would be to surrender. Well, the means they chose was by fraud and deception to destroy or scrap 1/10 of U.S. strategic power in being, and to block the production and deployment of additional advanced strategic systems. Without these elitist programs of self-fulfilling prophecy, the Soviets could not possibly have moved so close to a first strike capability against the United States. And likewise, the Committee on the Present Danger quoted intermittently in the review of U.S. and Soviet weaponry this pact with distinguished world order advocates, disarmament veterans, and Soviet apologists. These include Dean Rusk, Doug Dillon, and Paul Knights, who have all dedicated their careers to disarming the United States and to protecting Soviet imperialism. The committee's assessment of America's now real military inferiority is undoubtedly being used to stampede the masses into the New World Order. Only the shadowy figures within the inner core of cartel power know whether or not a Soviet nuclear attack is planned to hasten America's surrender to the plan. You can assume that the cartel's billionaire families wish to prevent nuclear war at all costs while making the transition into global dictatorship. For you might assume they do not actually wish to be nuked also. Now, is there something to prevent these charming comrades from turning against their super-rich capitalist collaborators and attack the United States in a double cross once your America is disarmed? Just the few elite world order planners will be spared, and that because of a predetermined compact within the Brotherhood of Death. Now, whether the Soviets would attack through the world police force or with their own military machine or with a combination of both is a moot point. You know that the strategy for America's ultimate surrender after Soviet nuclear attack has been outlined by former Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, whose culminated policy of unilateral disarmament left the American military apparatus in shambles by the early 1970s. McNamara suggested in 1983 that America continue to unilaterally disarm by junking the MX, by withdrawing nuclear weapons from Europe, and then establishing a multinational crisis management team to supervise what remains of Americans' weapons. And his prize recommendation was McGeorge Bundy. The National Security Advisor to Kennedy and Johnson has suggested that any nuclear attack be met with a retaliatory strike at a lesser level. And I completely agree. If nuclear war starts, one must try to stop it. This lesser response strategy could lead to a de-escalation rather than an escalation of any nuclear conflict. Oh, my dear ones, it gets ever so much worse. Now, this is typical of the groveling worldview of those who have prevented America from developing even a civil defense program to protect the population from radiation and starvation, lest the Soviets become angry and accuse America of aggressive behavior. Because a Soviet first strike will probably kill at least half of the U.S. population, and because even an all-out retaliatory response would be insufficient to defeat the Soviets, the McNamara-Bundy proposal for a delayed and muffled response to nuclear attack is nothing more than a proposal for unconditional and immediate surrender. The surrender motif has always figured heavily in the schemes of world order master planners. Bertrand Russell, collaborator at the Pugwash conferences, at which U.S. industrialists and Soviet leaders planned step-by-step unilateral disarmament of the West, instructed Britain, "We must learn to submit to law, even when imposed by aliens whom we hate and despise, and whom we believe to be blind to all right." An innovative strategy for America's surrender to the Soviet juggernaut has been outlined by New Age pacifists Ron Sider and Richard Taylor. In Nuclear Holocaust and Christian Hope, they urge immediate and complete unilateral disarmament of the United States, which they admit would very likely result in a Soviet invasion. They also readily acknowledge that a Soviet invasion could result in millions of American deaths. Now, these degenerate nerds then explain how Americans must nevertheless restrain themselves during Soviet invasion. The landing would be peaceful. No American artillery would fire. No jets would strafe. Instead of American soldiers crouching behind tanks and pointing guns at them, the invaders would see tens of thousands of unarmed people carrying signs with messages in the invaders' language, like the Czechs, Hungarians, and East Germans during the Russian invasion of these countries. Americans would climb up on the tanks and try to talk to soldiers. Why have you come? Why are you invading a peaceful nation that is not threatening you? And loudspeakers would explain that the troops are welcome as tourists, but will be opposed as invaders. If members of the crowd were not able to keep discipline and start to threaten the soldiers, special U.S. peacekeeping teams would move in and non-violent to restrain the persons who were losing control. If I indulged in the act of eating, I would most surely vomit right now. Can Little Earth brothers be so stupid? Well, it would appear to be so. Dr. Gary North has pointed out such a non-violent welcome could be moderately dangerous for the Soviets too, because they might die laughing. So be it, for we of command fleet have. A bit from what to do when the Russians come, we cannot totally exclude an all-out nuclear war in which America is largely destroyed, with far less Soviet loss resulting in occupation by Moscow's troops of a ruined, depopulated land, a scenario quite commonly found in Soviet military literature. But what seems more likely, given the Soviet achievement of effect superiority, would be a crumbling of America, either after a limit Soviet nuclear strike or simply under a threat against which the United States would have become practically defenseless. Military occupation, perhaps under a gradual and partial camouflage facade, would be inevitable. And however done, this would be accompanied by a slow but total Sovietization of America. Now, there is no point in being starry-eyed about the scope and possibilities of the American resistance. If resistance methods have grown more sophisticated, so have the means of combating them. It will be a long struggle. Let us draw some conclusions for thought food. Now, according to the above scenarios, when American survivors of Soviet attack and invasion lie prostrate at the boots of their godless oppressors, the world will be plunged into its final and darkest age. America, once the hope and light of the world, would become a land of concentration camps. And millions of those schooled in the old world order would be summarily executed or suffer slow death by hard labor and starvation. The world's boat people and foot people and the would-be escapees and defectors, dreaming of reaching freedom, would have their dream of a promised land extinguished forever. And yet there are other forces at work in the universe. The cartel with its boundless greed and the Soviet slavers drunk with power are not the only players in the human drama. There is a higher power confronting what the Apostle Paul described as the rulers of the darkness of this world and the spiritual wickedness in high places. Now, despite the hysterical protests of Marxists and humanists everywhere, there is a just God, the creator and author of freedom and human dignity. This magnificent and loving intelligence anticipated the planned millenniums before its perpetrators were born. And in his mercy, he has given his children a promise that the blood-drenched beast will die in an agonizing death. And John the Revelator tells you that the gangsters behind the great global monetary dictatorship and the police authority enforcing it face one minor disadvantage. Their days are numbered. And John revealed that the cartel has been allotted a limited segment of time for its global project. And he gave clues that the beast's secret combination will itself be burned with the very instruments it has prepared for world domination. Apparently, something yet unforeseen will cause the great red fetus to turn on its own mother for the kill. And John's vivid description of a terrible, fiery cataclysm that will engulf the world's richest cities is undeniably a description of nuclear holocaust, referring to the world's great financial centers as Babylon. John gave you this incredible preview if you but pay attention. And he, the angel, cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise any more. The merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of their torment, radioactivity, weeping and wailing. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught, for in 1 hour is she made desolate. And for thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets, and of saints, and of all that were slain upon the earth. Do you care to continue, little chelas? Do you want to hear the testimony that confirms? It is, you know, confirmed by sacred testimony and by long ago prophets and seers that the millions who died in global and regional wars, the millions who died during communist invasion, the hundreds of millions who died in Soviet and Red Chinese slave labor death camps, and the legions murdered while trying to escape totalitarianism, the millions condemned to death for their religious faith, all were victims of one single secret combination, whose perpetrators and benefactors have lived in a great wealth. Incredible as it may seem this day, John foresaw that the cartel's oppressive global economic system, computer networks and all, would be zeroed out in 1 hour. Think of it, little brothers. Generations of intensive labor to build a totalitarian world empire evaporated in less than 1 hour. 1 hour is about the length of time it will take Soviet subs to nuke America coastal cities into oblivion. So be it, and Selah. Yet what will become of the forces that have burned in a double cross the cartel's great corporate and financial centers? Will the jaws of the Soviet python swallow the entire Western Hemisphere? That is surely Soviet design. But the best laid plans of tyrants have gone awry throughout history. Without Chase Manhattan, the Export-Import Bank, and the large mega corporations of the West to back and supply them, the communists will fail. A clue to the inevitable destruction of the red cancer is found in the observation of Viktor Suvorov, whose experience in the Soviet military leads him to conclude the fastest Soviet aircraft are flown by men who detest socialism with all their hearts. In wartime, tens of millions of soldiers would have an opportunity to desert and they would take it. Soviet soldiers would surrender by the million. And could it be that you might gain friends from these enemies? Man to man, out of the darkness of ignorance and subterfuge into light and truth? Could it be possible? They too are blinded ones of the lies. The Soviet Empire is a seething mass of dissent. There are hundreds of millions of slaves in communist-occupied countries who despise their Soviet, Cuban, and Red Chinese masters, now being held as prisoners of war within their own nations. And they would take any opportunity to rise against their cage keepers. You would have just these past 2 months experienced the extent to which man will go to gain freedom from those oppressors. Thus, during the chaos of global war, it is possible the controllers could lose control of their dominions. Now back to Satan, always back to Satan. The cartel's plan, Satan's counterfeit scheme for millennial perfection, must ultimately fail. Built upon the foundations of greed, deceit, and genocide, the plan harbors the seeds of its own destruction, and it will inevitably collapse upon itself. The cartel's plan is merely a blip within the greater plan of God the Father. The cartel's plan is an opportunity for each man to choose between good and evil. It is an opportunity for mankind to behold the ripest fruits of Satanism. It is a lesson you will take with you to eternity. And after the beast's great monetary system collapses, your Christ will necessarily seize the reins of global power and destroy the armies of the beast. Let us look at another thing that John said. And I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron. And he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God. And he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And I saw the beast, and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive unto a lake of fire burning with brimstone. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. You still have a distance to go. The ultimate fate of the beast and his disciples is set and irreversible. The world has yet to experience the maximum extension of the cartel's eco-political power. In his zenith fast approaching, the beast will be so formidable, both politically and militarily, that the world will say, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? Yet, you must remember that the power of the beast will be commensurate only with the number of world citizens who can be deceived in supporting his evil plan. So which will you choose? Honor unto the few. In honor I dedicate these final words unto ones who shall remain unnamed for their safety and security, and for that reason have we penned this document. There are a brave few who continue and shall continue until it is over to focus on the cartel family themselves, identifying their corporate interlocks, their political front organizations, their influential think tanks, their propaganda vehicles, and the sources of their unfathomable wealth and their international network of corruption and influence. And they will positively identify the central coordinating mechanism through which governments of the world are giving their marching orders, and we shall support them unto the end for the truth of it. With unimpeachable documents, they will identify the linking control centers through which the cartel selects and trains the governing elite of Soviet Russia and Communist China. And you, as a citizenry of a dying world, must look at these things. You must look and examine the cartel's super-secret Brotherhood of Death, whose members swear allegiance to a power cult which bases initiation rituals on the human skull and bone ancient symbols of death. And for generations, members of this clandestine order have been placed in powerful government positions to augment the plan through war and revolution. Look now at some of the members of this brotherhood. Members have included Roosevelt's Secretary of War, Henry L. Stimson, who knew with absolute certainty days in advance that Pearl Harbor would be attacked, and who authorized the use of the atomic bomb on Japan after that nation had served its purposes. The Brotherhood of Death also spawned former Ford Foundation President McGeorge Bundy and his brother William. And as presidential assistants, these two men directed the escalation of the Vietnam War while simultaneously maintaining links to the anti-war movement. George Bush, who personally strong-armed Western European leaders into accepting the catastrophic INF Treaty, has been selected by most powerful people in the world to preside over America's final surrender to the plan. The Bush family, at the center of cartel power, has long been affiliated with the Wall Street nexus, which financed the Russian Bolshevik Revolution. George Bush's father was a partner in Brown Brothers Harriman, a private banking firm packed with Skull and Bone Brothers. This firm was a foremost vehicle through which the cartel nurtured Soviet dictatorship in its infancy. And like his father before him, George Bush is a member of the Skull and Bones Brotherhood of Death. Indicative of the awesome power of this secret order is the fact that the Brotherhood of Death has had an office in the White House for the last 8 years, and it now holds the presidency of the United States of America. The cartel operates for its own sinister purposes. The executive branch of the U.S. government hand-picking and controlling all U.S. presidents and their appointees. The cartel, having pre-planned both world wars and also the Korean and Vietnam conflagrations, controlled U.S. forces while also backing and financing the enemy. The cartel have seized control of public education and is now constructing a national propaganda apparatus for uniform mass indoctrination on behalf of the plan. Now for the surprise. You thought this was a political movement. Nay, it is the most fundamental foundation of a bestial religion. Leaders denounce truth and God in the same breath that they claim to honor and revere His presence, a most remarkable mark of the Satan witness. They uphold Lucifer as the light, and they call for ruthless suppression of Christianity and all free fundamental worshipers of God. They suggest revision of the Bible to portray the cartel's plan as God's plan, just as the council of the churches have voted in all manner of evil behavior that blatantly rebukes the commandments of the creation and God. And they shall further continue to implement hideous genocidal programs to drastically reduce the world's population through AIDS, murder, drugs, and crimes of all sorts against humanity. May the ones I honor this day come into the knowledge of this salute unto them for that which they can do can save a civilization of man, so be it. Following is the World Order Models Project, WOMP. The following bureaucratic apparatus for world government has been designed by the Rockefeller-Carnegie-funded WOMP. This central guidance system, as outlined by WOMP Director Richard Falk in a study of future worlds in 1975, is designed to administer global socialism. Global socialism. It includes a global police authority slated to control all nuclear and conventional weapons. The world government, now growing steadily upon the framework of the United Nations, will require millions of authorities to maintain effective control and surveillance of several billion global citizens. Americans presently have zero electoral control over the thousands of appointed United Nations bureaucrats who already administer decisions affecting the U.S. both economically and militarily. And as the world authority gains ever more power, global citizens will continue to have little or no electoral control of the elites who dictate world policy. Here's a skeptical outline of the world governing authority as envisioned by WOMP master planners. A. World Assembly. Now this is the principal policy-making legislative body comprised of three chambers: the Assembly of Governments, the Assembly of Peoples, and Assembly of Organizations and Associations. This body will set world standards and render binding decisions. B. The Council of Principals. Now this is the chief administrative body designed to implement and enforce directives of the World Assembly. The Council will be comprised of a Secretary General and 21 other officials chosen from the three chambers of the Assembly. C. World Implementing Board. Now this nest of overseers will link the World Assembly and the Council to the following: a world security system. This is a massive tripartite bureaucracy charged with disarmament of all nations. It's World Disarmament Service, the maintenance of global peace through a global military force, world security forces, and settlement of disputes, the World Grievance System. Then there's the World Economic System. Now this network will coordinate a computerized global socialist economy, and it will enable the cartel to centralize control of all major components of global wealth, including natural resources, trade, and labor. And under that system falls the World Economic Planning and Equity Council. This department will maintain a global network of authorities who will equalize the economic status of the masses. It will ensure full employment for global citizens who may be shifted from place to place to fulfill their employment duties. And then there's the World Trade System. The directors will supervise all business and commerce and shape global trade through redistributive and equalizing objectives. Officials will impose duties on transferred goods, which in Richard Falk's words, embellish life with ornaments of superaffluence. And under that is the World Monetary and Tax Policy Council. Directors will regulate the single paper currency used in world trade, and they will administer a global taxation program. And then they have the World Technology Board. Officials will maintain continuous scrutiny of all human activity in order to assess environmental consequences. And then they have the World Development Office. These officers will coordinate socialist redistribution of wealth and global economic leveling. World System for Human Development. Now this is the third objective. This apparatus is designed to supervise the development of man. According to Fox, world order bureaucrats will reshape, restrict, or prohibit policies which do not reflect the cartel's approved humanist worldview. The raw power to be exercised by this authority can be assessed from Fox's didactic statement. However, we do take a position of generalized opposition to fashion and advertising, which encourage waste of resources and shallow horizons of personal aspiration. The World Forum of Long-Range Planning for Human Development, and these directors will manage the welfare of global citizens and coordinate town meetings on a global scale to deal with all facts of mental health and human development. This authority will also coordinate world order propaganda for satellite television. Think the Hunger Games, folks. The World Forum for Human Development. Now, this network will ensure that environmental factors facilitate the development of personality and character along WOMP lines, so that all global citizens will be sure to share a uniform socialist worldview. And then is the World Commission and Court of Human Rights. These officials selected by the Secretary General will render decisions regarding abuse of human rights in order to advance WOMP's commitment to what FOC calls pursuit of racial, sexual, religious, and economic equality. And fourth and last, the World System for Ecological Balance. Now, officials will deal with issues of pollution, and they will operate a surveillance network designed to facilitate greater understanding of the facts, risks, and the choices facing the control centers of the preferred world. Bureaucrats will specialize in identifying areas of consensus and concentrate on strategies to mitigate dissent. That, friend, means to terminate any dissenters. And yes, this is a nightmare, but you will not simply wake up and the beast will be gone. If, however, you do not wake up, everything worth having in this world shall be gone. And there is a book entitled The Plan. Please obtain a copy, for these wondrous ones have risked their very lives to bring forth information to save yours. And then an address is provided. It's Independent Research Associates, Box 2013, Hayden, Idaho, 83835. I am Hatton. May God bless and keep you, for you do not know that which you do, for you are as lambs unto the slaughter. Hatton to clear frequency, please.